I just noticed on the agenda, Matt, the first one was withdrawn. The second one was postponed.
Yes, that is correct.
So that means we're back to notification policy for conditional use permits.
Yes, and then I have prepared, I guess once we close the meeting, I've prepared some HB 55 training.
Oh, the kind of thing that I've been skipping ever since I was in elementary school.
Yep.
Oh, God, I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh, man, what a good day this has turned out to be.
Yeah.
Well, I can do those minutes easily.
I believe the first applicant had filed his application, and then I think he told me later realized that his homeowners association restrictions would actually not allow him to have a home business, so he ended up withdrawing. Okay, and Barbara's having some troubles with her internet, so she's on by her phone and she may not have sound. Red, I can't hear you.
Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Barbara.
Okay, cool. Oh. Well, I've got it. I'm on here twice.
Yes, that is what it looks like. I guess you have two different devices logged in, or?
I just logged out of my phone because
Matt, are we going to have a discussion on the notification policy?
We certainly can. I was going to wait till we could open the meeting and do the minutes from the previous meeting, and then.
Oh, no, I understand all that. I'm just doing minutes so that I
Gotcha.
can make my escape at the soonest possible moment.
I see. Yes, I do have.
So yes, we will. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, don't wait on me. Go right ahead.
I think we're just working on some technical
okay, that's fine.
difficulties right now.
Do you have your recommendations, or if you are that far along, on the possible changes to the notification policy?
I do.
Because if so, I can attach a copy of that to the minutes.
Okay, I don't have it written.
Oh, well, when all right, in that case,
I guess today I was hoping we'd have more of a discussion, but I do. I mean, I guess I have a recommendation. I just haven't written it up.
Okay. Well, when we get ready to vote or something, we'll attach it then. No, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. yeah, we certainly don't necessarily even need to vote on any changes today.
Is this thing on? Oh, it works
Yes.
now. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I lost my entire internet network and everything there for a minute.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounded like Barbara was having some troubles as well.
Could just be one of those days. It has been. Anyway, does that seem appropriate for you all, or should I fool with it a little more? Is it loud enough, etc.?
I think it sounds fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll keep these settings up just in case, but okay. We shall now commence the March 1st meeting of the Georgetown Board of Adjustments. And our first item of business will be to look over and approve of the last month's minutes. I don't know if you all have had some time to look them over while I was gone, but they all seem to be in order for me.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion has made, needs a second. Well, I'll second the motion and we'll call that to a vote. All those in favor of approval of last month's minutes by sign of aye. Okay. Motion passes. The minutes from last month are approved. I see we have one item of business that's been postponed. And Matt, you may know better than me, but I don't see any attendees potentially to represent the application that we are discussing.
No, we actually won't discuss any applications. Shortly after the packets were mailed, the item A under new business, I was contacted by the property owner, and he is withdrawing that application as well. His HOA restrictions will not allow him to have a home business, so he withdrew his application.
Oh, let me guess. That was probably an email that I didn't bother to read.
I think it was in the one where the packet was sent.
Oh, okay. Well, that's why I didn't even open it. I just opened my paper copy. Okay. Well, that's stellar. What else would y'all like to take care of today?
I think we have the notification policy on the agenda still. I'm prepared today to have a discussion on that. And then I guess as I was telling people before, once we close the meeting, since we have such a short agenda, I thought it would be appropriate to have some HB 55 training so that we can all stay current on our hours. If you'd like, I can go right into the notification policy discussion.
Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, let me bring that up. Right. So just as a brief overview, our current notification policy does involve sending mailed notices to all property owners within 100 feet. And we send those 2 weeks prior to the meeting. So we did send, on the two items on the agenda at the time that we sent the notices, both of those were intended to be heard. So notices were mailed to all property owners within 100 feet of both those applications. Our GIS department prepares that notification list, and the property ownership and mailing address information is all from PVA. So obviously it's always very important that PVA has correct information on your property, but even more so if you would like to be informed of applications that might be happening nearby. So what we have here, this is a sample of what the notification map that our GIS department looks like. This is a residential application that we heard last month on General John Payne. So the circle or the red outline is the property, where the variance was being requested. The blue line indicates all the properties within 500 feet, or sorry, within 100 feet. So those are the properties that were notified about that application. The purple line in this case represents a notification boundary of 500 feet, which is what we use for planning commission applications. Now, as the discussion today here indicates, that the application that was heard on this property was a variance. I'm not recommending that we make any changes to our variance notification policy. What I am trying to outline is, when we look at a residential property, if this had been a conditional use permit, somebody was maybe looking to operate a daycare out of their home or a home business, or, at schools and churches are conditional uses in residential zones. This is what the notification boundary would be. If somebody owned 470 and they wanted to operate a daycare, it looks like mostly, one or two property owners on either side and one or two property owners across the street would be the only ones that would get notified. The larger 500 buffer area might honestly be too large. And in general, and we can discuss this more later, I am mostly okay with the way we notify for conditional use permits in residential areas. I mean, most of the time, the conditional use permit applications are very appropriate for residential areas. And so I'm not at this time proposing any changes, but I wanted to just sort of give an example of sort of what we do with Board of Adjustment versus Planning Commission on a residential property. Here on this one, we've got sort of the same thing. This was an application we heard last month. It's the church on Southgate Drive. Used to be an old Walmart. It's a commercially zoned property. And as you can see, when we look at the notification area around that, even though it is a much larger parcel, you really don't end up notifying that many more properties, even with a 100-foot buffer. Whereas, even though with this application, once again, it was for a variance. Had it been a conditional use permit application, the conditional use permits or the conditional uses in commercial areas can sometimes impact a much wider area. In some cases, it's, although rare, people do apply for conditional uses to store things on commercial sites outdoors. Those may have odors or, different negative impacts on neighboring properties. In some cases, I believe adult uses are conditional uses in some of our commercial districts. We do also have things like mobile home parks as conditional uses in our commercial areas. And I do feel as though it is appropriate maybe to at least consider expanding our notification area for commercial property. So if you look at this one, and this is just one example that we pulled from an application we had last month. Had this been an application that would have had a wider impact on the surrounding area, almost none of the residences that are nearby would have been notified at all. And honestly, not many of the commercial businesses in the area would have been notified based on that blue 100-foot notification boundary that you can see on the map. So whether or not increasing that to 500 feet like we have for planning commission applications inside the city is the best answer. I do think that we maybe need to consider at least expanding for commercial properties, conditional use permits, expanding that notification boundary out a little bit further, just because there is a much greater chance that it would have a wider impact than say our residential conditional uses. Commercial sites tend to be larger. The conditional uses in their areas tend to impact a much larger area as well, not just because the sites are bigger, but just because the uses are so much different than the conditional uses in our residential areas. So I don't have a formal recommendation as far as I think that the notification boundary should be this. I was mostly looking today to just have a discussion with you all, get some of your input, and then if it sounds like maybe we have some sort of consensus, even if that consensus is we just want to leave it, leave everything the way it is, we can go from there. If we do want to see some sort of change, I could draft something up for next meeting.
Matt, could you go back to the residential one you showed earlier? if you would picture that not as having a golf course behind it, but kind of imagine that if it were in the middle of Indian Hills with houses all the way around it, the 100 that's there now may not be really sufficient, but the 500 would have people in it that would never in a million years see anything that was different. So I think that's almost wildly too much. If you made it 200 feet, that's still going to get you probably 3 lots in any direction. Our conditional uses in residential zones really don't allow any visual proof of anything except a 6 square foot sign. I can't imagine even 200 feet really hitting people who are going to be inconvenienced in any serious way. But at least that way, I think we include everybody who might be otherwise inconvenienced. To go any further than that, I think we're just causing a whole lot of people some concern for something that is really not likely to ever really be a problem for them.
No, I entirely agree. And that 200, 250 number is exactly what I kind of had in mind when I see this scenario. And I agree with, while those people should be informed, I think, say, if this application A had been tonight with a 500, foot notification area, we'd be setting ourselves up for like a 4-hour meeting.
Oh my, where would we hold such a meeting?
Yeah, well, I guess on Zoom. I don't know.
Oh, well, I guess for now, yes, sir, you're right.
We can use the Great Crossing High School auditorium. So, but no, I think Charlie, I had thought that number as well, 200, 250, because even if you were to plop this down and say the neighborhoods behind Ann Mason, et cetera, the new one that's going in across from Stonehenge, I mean, all of a sudden you've got 100 people getting notified. That's a lot of postage. Too.
Yeah, it's unnecessary expense, but a lot of people really get upset when they get one of these letters because they think something really bad might be happening, and it almost never is, because our conditional uses, especially in residential zones, don't allow you to do anything that noise, and all that stuff escapes the property. So I just think we'd be upsetting a lot of people for no reason.
Yeah, and heaven forbid you use the word subdivision.
Well, that word needs to be just forbidden, period.
I agree.
What if we left the residential one alone and maybe just expanded it a little bit for the commercial? What do you guys think about that?
Well, if I might ask a question on that one, Matt, because I don't have my ordinance right here in front of you, Matt, what kinds of conditional uses? The one we have almost all the time is outdoor storage. Almost never have anything, at least that I'm thinking of at the moment. And people don't often like to see outdoor storage, except almost every commercial enterprise these days has outdoor storage. What other conditional uses do we have in commercial zones other than outdoor storage? And that's like, displays and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, let me bring that up.
Because most of that, it doesn't seem like it really would affect that many people.
All right. So I mean, some and these are usually not very, don't usually have too many side effects other than what you would find with regular commercial. But libraries, churches, parks, recreational facilities, hospitals are conditional uses basically in all zoning districts. As far as some of the more, some of the other ones in the B2 district, outdoor storage and processing, warehouses, mobile home parks, trailer camps, and mobile home subdivisions. In the B4, animal hospitals and clinics. Once again, outdoor storage. Let's see, what's in the B5? Outdoor storage, animal hospitals and clinics. I mean, I guess I could go through and provide a sort of a comprehensive list if that would be helpful, because I know there are some areas where there are conditional uses. It's not necessarily specifically listed in the zoning district, but, some areas where, special sections of the ordinance have been created, and it would just list the conditional uses, or the districts rather, where it would be permitted in conditional uses.
Before I forget, first off, just curious, how quickly would an adjustment of these distances occur? Like, say, if we talked about it tonight, would it go into action by this current cycle's notifications, or?
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, if you guys changed it tonight, it would impact the applications heard next month.
Well, I'm mostly curious because you just had said, mobile home areas, and I've just got top of mind awareness with this Paris Park application, Paris Pike. Excuse me. I know that's kind of off by itself. So have many people at all really been notified with the current boundaries as they are? Because I know this is potentially going to be a pretty hot topic as well.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. With that application in particular, there were honestly not very many properties notified. I think some of the properties notified were other properties owned by the applicant, maybe a couple properties on the other side of Connector Road, and the Finley property to the north. And that was really, I guess, about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely need to look into creating larger boundaries for some of these commercial applications, because I think with the growth we're going to see, developing some different parcels that aren't necessarily already inside a lot of other development, I bet we'd really hear about it if we only notified, essentially the owner and his neighbors about this 100 lot mobile home park that's potentially going to go in, right where everybody's going to be affected in that traffic zone.
Yeah.
I've got my concerns about this application anyway, but stuff like that, I think we're going to see cropping up more and more as we develop some of the newer areas. So I think we definitely need to consider expanding those boundaries to how much, I don't know. If some of the more in-town development that's going to be redone as buildings change hands, et cetera, we could get into notifying way too many people. But for stuff like this, where it's out by itself, I think we're definitely going to have to consider something different.
If I might raise a couple of points, especially on that particular application, Mr. Chairman. Everything that's come up out there has drawn a tremendous crowd, regardless of the notices that we've sent out, because there's just a huge number of people who think they've got too much stuff there already. But this is compounded because there are, and Matt, you could be more specific, but there are several properties in that one large tract that they've split off into separate little businesses, but they're all owned by the same people. So we could conceivably have 100 foot, and all we're notifying are the people who were already connected to the business, to the applicant itself. So I think if nothing else, we probably should add into our policy that notices to related companies doesn't count. We move another 100 feet beyond that, or whatever the distance might be. And that's in relation to that one particular application. But number two, oh my goodness, where did it go? Oh, Matt, yeah, question.
Yes.
You answered the chair's question by saying, oh no, it would take effect immediately. Is none of this in our regulations?
No, my understanding is that the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment notifications are basically policies of those organizations. So I don't think any of them take ordinance adoption by city.
I have often wondered about that. I've meant to ask that any number of times through the years, and every time get off on something else. Well, if that's the case, then yes, Matt's answer is correct. It was simply policy. I can't imagine that it's not somewhere in regs, because if it's in regs, it needs to be by ordinance. So this is great.
I mean, it is in, I think for conditional uses, it is in state statute that at a minimum, we notify adjoining property owners.
All you gotta do is say yay or nay.
Was that a question asked? I think I heard somebody. No.
No, I don't know.
Well, that was strange, but yeah, to Charlie's point, I think we could also kind of run into that scenario, say if you like have a strip mall area or something like that, where it's one owner for multiple spaces, et cetera, et cetera. I think that could be a concern. Especially say like in the case of Indian Acres, that whole complex may be owned by one or two people, but then the 100 feet, even 200 feet may not touch a home that's in the neighborhood, depending on what business.
Yeah.
I'm starting, I think 200 or 250, depending on how you want to say it, I think is appropriate for residential. This commercial, I guess, is really the booger of what you all decide is appropriate. And also, again, some of those exceptions and how to move boundaries if needed.
If I could make one other suggestion, back to the residential, I can't imagine really any place where 200 feet would not get in at least 3 lots. So a circumference which has 3 on all sides of the applicant, I really can't imagine we need any more than that. Because once you move to the 250, suddenly now we're 4 or 5 lots. That's a whole lot of people. So I would say, at least for the time being, if we just left it at the 200, and then we can always see how that works. It may well be that we find that's a little too much. But I think that's probably a very good place to start on residential CUPs. Now, unfortunately, commercial is, especially since some of those things, like putting in a church, for example, unless it's a pretty big operation and parking is a real problem, I can't imagine that really being a big deal for anybody. A daycare in some situations might be a big deal. And a lot of those, especially in a commercial app, I can't imagine that's a big deal at all. It may be that we need to look at some individual, maybe categories of conditional use permits in a commercial zone, and maybe not treat them all the same. A mobile home park probably ought to have the highest number, just simply because that adds a ton of traffic, if nothing else. Whereas, a daycare, that's probably not a big deal. Or outdoor storage, if you're a Lowe's, that's probably not that big a deal. But if we had maybe categories, because again, I don't think we want to notify more people than really fairly need to be concerned about it. Because they really get concerned about these things when they get that official letter in the mail. That's just, our life's work is going down the tubes. Well, not really, but they don't know that until, they raise Cain with somebody. Hopefully with Matt.
That is where it usually starts.
Yeah, I think the 200 feet residential is great. And not to make a ton of work on Matt, et cetera, but I do agree that with the way this commercial stuff looks, that I don't think it's a one size fits all scenario. However many levels or layers you want to do with that, I think I don't think 100 is ever going to get it at all for commercial. I could be wrong, but maybe a 200, 300, 500, something of that nature. I don't think it should ever be more than 5, and 5 is still going to be pretty high, but it would almost have to be 500 for, like you say, something like a mobile home park, larger development. But I guess I leave it to Matt and his findings, or who else he can have help him. Or if you want to, submit to us or myself some individual case studies and say, how do you feel like this should have played out? Just past cases, as it were.
Yeah, that's not a bad place to start.
Yeah, I think even just these most recent ones you pulled are great examples. But everything's going to be different. But, even if there's an application that sticks out in your mind where you're like, well, I really wish this would have been notified differently. Or if you can think of any application where you've had a lot of not necessarily neighbors come to you and be like, well, why wasn't I notified? Anything that sticks out in your mind in that manner. But I agree. I think it should be like a terraced approach, maybe 3. at the most. I wouldn't get any splitting any hairs any further than that.
Yeah.
I don't think 100 will ever be enough for this commercial, if only just to escape the, well, this one person owns all of this anyway scenario, or it's only one gas station that you're notifying, something silly.
One additional possibility that occurs to me, even if it weren't a mobile home park being requested on Connector Road, traffic at times, particularly on this end of it, is pretty severe. So it may well be that, and I agree, no more than 3 tiers of these things, even at that. But if it's an application that happens to be in an area that already has a known, traffic or some other kind of problems, that perhaps the policy could include the staff's discretion to extend the notice if in fact it appears for fairly reasonable justifications that the impact could extend a little further. And let me give you an example. As far as extending it, the Connector Road example is probably the best one in town because that's got difficulties of its own already. But then on the other end of the scale, when the $2 stores came in, I really don't recall, Matt, you may, I'm not so sure that it was a variance or anything. It was just simply those are commercial lots and they butt up against an existing residential. And we had notices, I think at that time, only went to the first row of houses. And so basically, if they weren't home or they didn't see the mail or they didn't care, the very next house was raising holy Cain with us. Why weren't we notified? Well, I think we've probably extended it since then a little bit.
Yes.
But what they did, well, it really wasn't anything they could contest anyway, because those were B2 lots. I mean, they could have a Family Dollar or a General Dollar without the people behind them, being able really to say or do anything. So if they're going to add some outdoor storage, say a couple of displays out front, they're not even going to be visible, from the people behind them. That's minimal. Connector Road, especially a mobile home park, that's lots and lots of traffic. Well, that needs to be some serious notification. So in addition to maybe 2 or 3 levels, then add to it that, on the other hand, if there are certain characteristics of that neighborhood that might require impact or might draw impact further, that staff has the discretion to extend the notice period. Not period, but distance. Because in certain circumstances, we don't want too little. It's just that we don't want too much. We never want too much, but sometimes we might end up with too little, and it would be nice if staff could say, take it another 100 feet or so, because there's just going to be a lot of public interest in this, and we want to make sure people know about it.
Well, do we even want to get into classifying anything into tiers? Is that a little bit too excessive? Should we just make it blanket policy notification area of 200-foot boundary with staff discretion not to exceed 500 feet? And that be both commercial and residential? That way we don't have to get into the fuss. Well, this goes in this tier and that goes in that tier, and then still Matt has to adjust it regardless.
And all I can suggest on that one is I don't think we should lump it all, because I think residential is its own thing, because they're too restrictive. They can't have these extensive effects that go into adjacent properties. So I don't think that should be included at all. They should be just, again, maybe 200 feet, but no further. The commercial ones, I just think there's a wide range of impact. So we probably ought to have some tiers, because we don't want to put everything on staff's back, because then they're going to have people mad at them every time. It's either too much or it's too little every time. So I think we should have tiers. I like that idea. It's just that if it's a particularly problematic area, and Matt can say, well, we know there's going to be concern over traffic, there's going to be concern over lighting, something, then I think for those reasons, we ought to go a little bit further, because people need to know that this is a concern that's probably going to reach a larger number. But then in everyday stuff, they're not going to extend it. And if it's something, that staff looks at and says, that's minimal, well, then put that in the minimal category and we leave it alone. If it's something that's going to be, impactful pretty much most of the time, well, then that needs to be in, the second or third category. And I agree, not any more than that. But and then with staff, only in extraordinary circumstances they can extend it if it really looks like there's a wide public interest in it and impact.
Yeah. I think what I could do, maybe to help, so we don't have to go through every single category, or sorry, every single conditional use here tonight. I mean, I can sort of come up with a draft set of categories, we can look at them next month. If that would be, if you all would be agreeable to that. We don't, like I said before, we don't necessarily need to feel obligated to make any changes to our notification policy at this, at this time. We are complying with and exceeding the requirements that the state sets at this time. So I was just trying to, I mean, there have been a couple, like you mentioned, there have been a couple applications sort of in the past several years where, sometimes you do feel like, maybe not quite enough people were notified. And we'd like to make sure we get a nice balance.
Well, I think it's a prudent decision. And also, I agree with your idea of that would be wonderful if we could have some sort of draft. And I'm sure that would probably be about how we voted in. I can't imagine. And also, while I would like to maybe take a deeper look at this next month, I also don't think we should just write the idea off at all either. I think we should do something about it while it's top of mind awareness, while you're putting your time and effort into it, and we're only going to see more development. And it's just something we should jump on now while we have the opportunity. So yeah, not to put a whole lot of pressure on you. And again, if you need to ask myself or anybody else any questions, feel free.
Okay.
But I think that would be the best, is if something a little more pencil paper by maybe next month or whenever, month after. It's not urgent like you said. And then we'll go from there. I guess just have it like in a potentially adoptable format, whatever Mr. Perkins deems permissible, and we'll go from there. How's everybody else feel? Okay, but I agree. I'm on the same page with you all. If that's okay with you, Matt.
Yeah, that works just fine for me.
Stellar. Like, again, whenever you have it together, it doesn't have to be next month or the month after, but I also think we should get it done while we're thinking about it, or else this will be 3 years from now and somebody will be really upset that they didn't hear about something. She's upset too.
I agree.
Okay. Are we getting into any of the training stuff, or are we?
I think the next thing I had was the training. So if we wanted to just adjourn the meeting, we can just go into the training. And
So I can put it in the minutes what you're going to do after the adjournment. What was the topic going to be?
we are going to talk about home-based businesses or home occupations.
Oh,
the
good.
zoning
In that
ordinance
case, I'll
talks
put
about.
that in as what you're going to do after adjournment, and then I'm going to leave the meeting.
That sounds good.
Enjoyed seeing everyone, and I'm going to enjoy leaving even more. Have fun, guys. See ya.
Have a good one. All right. I guess my goal here with this training, I'm starting a little timer, is hopefully we can get about 30 minutes worth of training, and I'll get out of here and go to dinner and all that. What I wanted to talk about today was home-based businesses. This is something that comes up, I feel like, fairly frequently. We nearly had an application related to this today. And so just to start by going over how our ordinance currently handles that, is our ordinance calls these home occupations. It lists out some guidelines. So it has to be professional office, one professional, no additional staff, studio or personal services. It has to be contained in a dwelling or an accessory building. So if you've got a detached garage or something like that, you can do it in there. And then it has to meet these three conditions. The first one is a size condition, no more than 25% of the ground floor area, and should not exceed 300 square feet total. The second being that there shouldn't be any exterior evidence, except for you can do a sign that's up to 5 square feet in area. And then the third being sort of a nuisance requirement that, we don't want any pollution, light flashes, glare, odor, vibration, things like that, noise, excessive noise. So just to, I guess, sort of talk a little bit more about home-based businesses, and it is pretty common to see some businesses start out of a home, whether it's, somebody doing taxes around tax season. Sometimes realtors will operate out of their home. And in some cases, there's some other businesses. I know out in the county, we sometimes see things like landscaping businesses apply as home occupations. And sometimes those businesses eventually grow to where they need, separate commercial or industrial space. Just as a side note, and something I thought was interesting, Disney, Apple, and Hewlett Packard all started out of not the same residence, but out of a residence. And, while these are outliers, it is important to remember that, being able to operate a business or start a business at home that eventually, can grow into something very successful. It is important to sort of allow for some of that flexibility in our ordinances. I think it's also sort of important to note that, now that we have certainly much more e-commerce than we used to have, and how some elements of that have become much simpler, we do see a lot more people turning things that may have at one time been hobbies into home businesses. I know before, several years ago, we here in Georgetown, we had an application. I believe somebody was making ukuleles in their basement, and then they were selling them online. So things like that. It's also a trend that we're seeing where people are operating more on contract work. So, websites like Fiverr, and there's some other ones that are out there, make it really easy or simplify the process for finding contract work. Somebody's going to pay you X amount of money to, I don't know, you may just be, writing some computer code or things like that. And those are still, home businesses of sorts. Whether or not, it has large impacts on your neighbors or not, really, isn't described by our ordinance. So what I wanted to do with the bulk of our time was to have a discussion on home-based businesses or home occupations. And I really just wanted to start by talking about the definition that we have in our ordinance for home-based businesses. We're not necessarily looking to, draft a new definition or anything like that today, or make any, recommendations to City Council. But I mostly want us to have sort of an interactive training here where we actually think and talk about, the way that our ordinance handles, in this case, home-based businesses. So, even after COVID, is over and gone, I think it is still very likely we're going to see a large percentage, or at least a larger percentage of people working from home than we had, 5 years ago. So how do you all feel about, if I can go back, how do you all feel about our current definition of home occupation? I believe it was originally drafted back in 1988. I haven't seen any evidence that there's been any changes to the definition since then.
I don't think, I don't know that the square footage, restrictions really necessarily need to change, because I saw the language on another page about, relative to today's home sizes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that's necessarily relevant. I mean, I think there's homes of every size currently. 300 square feet, 20 by 15, if you're saying that that's your home office. Again, there might be different circumstances, somebody that has to have a lot of storage or something of that nature. But that's just something that jumped out to me.
Well, and Matt, I was just wondering too about, you'd mentioned like sometimes we have landscaping companies and things like that in the county. And on that definition, it says just one employee. So I guess that would, need to be taken into consideration as well.
Yeah. I mean, how do we feel about the, I guess, the employee restriction in general? Do we think that it is still appropriate for a home business to be restricted to a single employee, or, would it be, I guess, how much of an impact, if the home business is, avoiding nuisances and, is completely contained inside of a residence or an accessory building, would it be okay if they had 2 or 3 employees? Or do we still prefer to sort of be limited to just the one?
I mean, for me, I just think of myself whenever some of these come into play, and I wouldn't want a lot of people going in and out if my neighbor was doing something where, it was a home business. So I think we would have to definitely take that into consideration of how much more traffic it's going to bring into the neighborhoods. I feel like sometimes in the county, it's a little different because they're much more spread out.
Yeah, and there is some difference, and you mentioned the landscaping businesses that I mentioned before. There is some difference in the agricultural zone. In the conditional uses, they are expressly allowed to exceed the definition of home occupation. So it is, home. You see something like almost all the landscaping businesses have many employees, and that's permitted because sort of by the definition they are allowed to exceed the definition that's listed in the ordinance, and that language is something I'll probably discuss more with the county board at some time. Probably needs to be tightened up a little bit. So I guess regarding the nuisance restrictions that are in the ordinance, so I kind of scrolled back here so on item C, are there any, like I said, since the definition hasn't been updated since 1980, are there new nuisances that need to be considered, or do these ones still work very well? What do you guys think?
Matt, I think those look like they're working well. I mean, I can't really think of anything else that we would want to add.
Okay. I guess one of the things that I've I guess been thinking about a little bit lately is where it discusses shouldn't have any truck or other heavy traffic, and I've been wondering a little bit if maybe we need to think about adjusting that a little bit to maybe exclude delivery vehicles, just because particularly in residential areas, my street, we get Amazon, UPS, and FedEx coming every day, even though nobody on my street is operating a home business, and so it really wouldn't make that much difference. I guess not that much. I would not think it would be appropriate if a neighbor showed up to oppose an application, saying that, well, FedEx is going to be here every day, but FedEx is probably on that street already every day, if that makes sense.
I agree with that. I think to me, I just think of like large semi trucks going in and out whenever I think of that.
Okay. I guess the last one that I had sort of pre-prepared, customers and clients. I mean, obviously, each applicant, I don't have a specific application in mind, but each application is very specific unto itself. But how do we feel in general about a home business allowing customers and clients to visit? I know some are basically delivery only type businesses, but then there are also some. I'm thinking, I think I saw one the other day on East Main. Somebody's doing taxes since it's tax season. I mean, certainly they'll have some traffic, but probably not a whole lot. I guess is there is there a certain amount? I mean, we're not. None of these would likely ever generate an amount of traffic that Kroger would see. I'm trying to think if there, I think there was a one several years ago where somebody had a photography business. Um, I guess I guess what the question I was sort of getting at is like, should there be something in the definition that also refers to, you know, the amount of the number of clients that, you know, that the site can generate, you know, or what sort of threshold might there be from where, you know, yes, your business may have started as a home business, but is now sort of needing to graduate to, you know, an actual commercial space or industrial space.
Do we have any of that language already in there, Matt?
We don't. Basically, if you know, if somebody started to exceed the square footage requirement, although that would be probably near impossible for us to, you know, to accurately track. Or I guess in general, if we started receiving a lot of complaints from neighbors,
Yeah,
we
I
would
think
probably look into it.
I think our permitting in and of itself, because we kind of said that to the concerned public before, that we approve businesses in the good faith that they will not cause disruption to their neighbors. And we have deferred to the neighbors that, you know, we've had some that are very upset about X, Y, and Z. And we tell them, like, look, you know, if you have an issue with this business or what have you, then please report back to us. And, you know, we will approach it how we should. And so I think, you know, we